like the big, what do you call it?
We are live.
Economy person. Yeah, we're live. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us for the Sunday Club. And you can see we have a new guest with us. Welcome, Akshat Khaitan. Although you've been here, but like I was saying, you're always here when it's budget time. So welcome
Welcome,
back.
Akshat Khaitan. Although you've been here.
Oh, there is an echo.
That is, somebody is watching YouTube also at the same time.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah,
Well,
because I have to retweet also, no? So it's like a yeah.
Right. We need to acclimatize Akshat, I think, since he doesn't come here often. We need to get him into the Sunday Club groove, so that
I think he'll pick it up very fast. So
Yeah.
but Akshat runs a financial advisory service and a legal service, and he's really tuned in. He's out of Mumbai, and some of you may have seen him on the channel last year, and it was just very interesting to have him back again this year, where on the budget. Like I said, I'm not the big economy person, but Akshat, what I'm hearing this time round is a lot of good vibes. Like people are happy.
People are happy. People are more accommodative to what they will be offered to. Prudently populist, pro people, mention of everything, jack in all one box are all terminologies we can say for opening. While as we proceed, we may talk in detail. But yes, all in all, it was an all in all good budget. Mentioning everyone, if not taking care.
Now that's a little dicey. Professor gets it. Professor, what does this mean?
Look,
Professor, what I mean to say actually.
look. Let me. Akshat will say what Akshat wants to say. I'll say what I want to say. Look, as an economist, I read this budget in the context of the economic survey that came out a day earlier. And what stands out in the economic survey is basically the economic survey says that the entrepreneurs and the businessmen have to be given the necessary bandwidth. There is a trust deficit. On the one hand, you have announcements where a lot of things were announced for manufacturers, etc. But when it comes to the fine print, the bureaucracy has its ways of and means basically of to drag that back. So when I saw that particular phase, I had a fair idea what the budget would be. Now, what has grabbed headlines in the budget, obviously, is the tax slab. And other people may talk about it. I think that was extremely necessary because the middle class, the most vocal backer of this particular government, although, in terms of votes, it is possibly influential in a margin of areas. But when it comes to opinion making, I think the middle class is extremely important. That particular break has been given. So that's one part of it. What I see is the following, that in many countries, growth has been led by rising government expenditure. In the Indian economy, you have the government imposing fiscal discipline. From the very high deficits during the COVID time, we are on a glide there where the fiscal deficit as a proportion of the GDP actually is coming down, that the government is basically looking very hard at spending, and still we are getting this particular growth. We are getting this particular growth, and at a time when the government is also spending a lot on infrastructure, hoping to crowd in investment. Now, at one level, lots has been done to make investment in India very attractive. You have infrastructural growth. Now there's a push in railways. You have these PLI schemes. But we need something to trigger those animal spirits. And triggering those animal spirits actually lies outside the budget. Even in the budget.
Professor,
okay, one minute.
Yeah, one thing at a time. We don't want to get into the full lecture.
Sure.
One thing at a time.
Sure.
Your default setting is lecture mode. But
क्या करें यार, प्रोफेसर हूं मैं, देना पड़ता है यार, क्या करें.
But in terms of reviving the animal spirit, guess who's joined us? But his sister is not with us. So,
yeah.
Sandeep,
what's he having? He's having a banana or a
chocolate.
Chocolate, 5-star or something. Oh, good.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
So
I
are
think
you
five
indicating it's a five-star
Indian,
budget or something?
Indian chocolate. It's the best Indian chocolate, 5 star. Yeah.
Bro, Indian chocolate is like very good. I miss the gold coins we used to get as kids.
Oh yes.
You remember them? They were very good. But I think 5 star is still the best. I prefer it to Mars bar, Snickers,
Yeah.
all.
Munch is very good also, by the way.
That
Not
was
that any of these guys are sponsoring us, so let's stop
Yeah, I
talking
was
about
going to say
Uh,
that.
Pip it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't give them
Okay.
free plugs. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sandeep.
See, I will keep it restricted to a couple of things. I think, while optics and PR wise, the tax breaks are good, and it was unnecessarily getting bad, vibes, bad, negative spirit from this middle class who have been consistent backers of BJP, etc. So that's all good. But I think that makes a lot of good headlines and, this feel good factor. But the real stuff we have to see lies elsewhere. And as I've been saying, whenever I've spoken about the budget or before that, the elephant in the room is employment. You see, giving some money in the hand of people, you are not increasing their income. What you require, that will give you temporary respite, assuming that the money which you have put in, they're going to today go to the stores and spend it. Whether that's happening or not, you can't take it for granted because, as I say again, from a marketer point of view, there has been a lot of change in consumer behavior post-COVID. So, how much of that they're going to straight away go, and especially the people who are in the middle class and below, how much of that they're going to immediately spend on consumption expenditure, one has to wait and watch. But even if they do, that's a temporary, bridging thing. You have to increase the income. And to increase income, there has to be an employment. Now, none of that is an easy overnight solution. One biggest problem we have is all the investments which are going in, and people are talking of big ticket investments coming in, big projects. Those have a very small employment multiplier. You see, even if you're talking about all these China plus one industry coming in, they're very highly automated plants. You're really not adding too many hands or feet on the shop floor. So you have to, and where you're adding people are in the services sector, but there you have a skills mismatch. You don't have people being skilled enough to take on those jobs. And that's why you have the displacement. That's why there is this whole clamor for government jobs, sarkari naukri, etc., which keep coming, and people keep on saying you're having PhDs apply for peons jobs, etc. And that's a mismatch. And if the government takes spends more money to employ more people in government, then you're going against that whole tenet of maximum governance, minimum government, because that's when you add that, and that's when you're adding bureaucracy, you're adding what is now called retail corruption, euphemistically down the line, and all that holds back what Dr. or Professor is saying about the animal spirit. So that's the big challenge. So there are a lot of right noises. That the thing about trying to create employment, rural employment, to prevent migration or contain migration, all those are right noises. But how those get translated is the point. And last thing, none of this can happen, Advaita. We look at the budget saying what the central government will do. Nothing really happens unless the states join hand, and that's where your double engine sarkar principle comes in play.
Okay, we'll discuss that at a later point. Thanks, Sandeep. Balsamic, what do you make of it? I mean, the one thing that I always find interesting is what's getting more expensive, what's getting cheaper. So, picking up on Sandeep's consumption pattern, can you tell us what's getting cheaper, what's getting more expensive?
He's going to buy a new Harley Davidson. That rates have come down.
I don't see Balsamic on a Harley Davidson.
Never. I don't ride two-wheelers. I don't ride anything without an air conditioner in it, please. Ugh.
I think the EV prices should come down because I see like there's some components that are going to attract less duty.
Look, see, the first thing you need to understand is it's all fine bringing down all the taxes and everything. And even there, you bring it down in such a complicated way that it took people almost a day and a half to figure out how this 12 lakh was going to work. If you earn 12 lakh and 1 rupees or 12 lakh and 26 rupees, a different slab works for you. This is the kind of unnecessary complication that leads to all kinds of rentier economies in play. Okay, number one. Was the increasing of the tax bracket good? Fantastic, yes. Let's look at the second thing. Most of your revenue is destroyed by wasteful expenditure. Okay. Why don't you cut that? Instead of reading out tax slabs, which are very tough to read out, why don't you start cutting wasteful expenditure that the government does? Reading out tax slabs, which are very tough to read out. Why am I? Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah.
Advaita.
It's not me.
Yeah, it is. But anyway, so what is happening out here is a lot of our taxes are literally going into things that make absolutely no sense and get cancelled out. You start eliminating the wastage, you will automatically see revenues go up. You need a much straighter tax bracket. Now, I really don't care how much I pay for my groceries. It's too small a line item in my budget for me to care. But that is not everybody. A lot of people care about how much their groceries go up. Now, you actually want to start helping people cut revenue. Second thing, coming to what Sandeep said, jobs. Most of your people are completely unemployable in this country. The education you provide doesn't even make them a factory floor worker, पर उनकी ख्वाब है कि वो Steve Jobs बनेंगे अगला. Right? Now, trust me on this. Every mother whose child gets into a BE course thinks her son is the next Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or whatever. Okay? So, your education is so crappy. You don't want to invest in human beings. You really need to cut all this wasteful expenditure and put it into human beings. That's all I'm going to say, because my fiscal minutiae don't matter. But starting off with a makhana board, we're trying to get rid of the tea and coffee board out here because they don't do anything, and to come up with a makhana board. That said, let's just be very clear. It's a good thing कि इतना burden उतर गया है लोगों से. I'll give it an 8 on 10 for that. To recognize who is suffering, shift it to more consumer stimulus. And that way the GST works. The more consumption, the more GST revenue you gather it in other ways. It works perfectly fine. Very good. Fantastic. You want people to... Interest rates in this country are way too high. When you want to simulate industrial growth, you cannot have borrowing at such high levels. It is insane. On the other hand, everybody puts their thing into banks. Why do they put it into banks and things like that? Because your regulatory system is so bad. You don't know when a fraudulent startup is going to go bankrupt or whatever. You don't know how to control things like that. So you keep interest rates high, which doesn't stimulate industry. Then people are scared, afraid in equity markets because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. There are too many contradictions in the system. Real reform is cancelling out all those contradictions.
Okay.
So I'm happy with the budget, but generally I'm generally, I'm the pessimistic, cynical, perpetually disappointed sort.
Okay. Akshat, do you want to take on some of the things that AIM has brought up?
So one sector which has been really disappointed is the MSME sector, because while they have doubled the criteria and the threshold, what the MSME actually needed is some kind of a stress stabilization stimulus, which the MSME sector has been demanding for long, as there is a lot of disalignment and no hand holding in the way the MSMEs are getting functioned. Second, yes, employment, a very key area where nothing concrete has come up. In fact, the usage of words like employable people and employable youth by the finance minister in the budget does raise eyebrows that how big and grave is the problem. So the area of how we bring every youth and every citizen of this country to parity, to being an employable youth and being an employable citizen, is something which raise eyebrows about the system and about how we are perceiving it and taking forward. The third is in the field of education, we have a national education policy. But are we actually integrating it with the new policies and schemes? You may give 500 crore for establishing AI in education, much appreciated. Hats off. But at the grassroots level, where there is a huge problem of integration of this national education policy with the current upcoming policies and reforms is also a very big concern. So yes, education, employment, and MSME have been three areas. One thing which we expected now from the government is that there will be no preferential announcements and it will be very unified. But even before the budget, we started speculating Bihar, and Bihar Bonanza has made it very politically prudent that how the budget has shaped. And yes, we are getting rid of all boards, be it do tea, coffee, and with the Makhana board coming up, it may empower youth and it may empower employment in Bihar. But are we doing the right thing by having a pickpocket, target-oriented thing in this country at this stage, where we are looking for a Viksit Bharat? Is a question which is there for all of us.
Okay, all right. I'm all for the makhana board because makhana is a superfood, very globally it has people excited. And just like, other countries in South America have. What are you laughing about, Professor? It's true. It's a superfood and it's got huge buzz internationally. They're able to package that and ensure that it gets to the Western market. It's a huge market out there.
Adwaita, given the fact that we live in the real world where politics have to be played, a Makhana board is a very small thing in the larger scheme of things. So, okay, I mean, tea board hatao, Makhana board lao, that's not a problem. The thing is, when it comes to stimulating growth, employment, etc., there are things that the budget can do and there are things that have to be done outside the budget. So, for example, Shondeep and Akshat talked about employability and the national education policy. If you look at the national education policy, the document is a short one and it makes tremendous sense. But when it comes to implementation, the agencies that implement it make a hash of things. If you are talking about skilling, shouldn't industries, services be on board when it comes to seeing what our kids should learn? And the fact is, without exception, that does not happen. Because the skilling industry and the education industry apparently don't sit on the same table. Industry does not sit on the same table. So there are these particular problems that should be taken care of. Skilling is a problem. But one of the things that I welcome in this particular budget is this insurance scheme, health insurance scheme being extended to the gig workers. Look, there is a large number of workers where the gig economy is concerned. And if you are going into newer and newer industries, newer and newer sectors, the gig economy will become better. And when those economies or those sectors stabilize, perhaps many of them will be regularized. But till such a point, you need some sort of a social security net. And I hope some pension scheme is also worked out for them. So what happens is the following. The uncertainty that is associated with this kind of employment comes down somewhat. It becomes that much more attractive. So this is the very important building block. But the fact remains, as Akshat pointed out, MSMEs, see, we have already compliance costs are very high. For a large company, compliance cost is a very small part of their turnover. But for MSMEs, micro enterprises, they become pretty large. So what are they going to do? Run their business or basically do compliance reports? This is something that I think has to be given sufficient attention. And that is what the economic survey talks about. Here, let us have a atmosphere of trust rather than an atmosphere of mistrust.
Okay. And what about GST? We have still the same process of filing and everything?
That
still complicated? Okay. Need to know.
That's all.
I think Shondeep can tell you.
What Akshat?
Akshat, go ahead.
Akshat is saying something.
GST now totally it's under the purview of GST Council.
Yes.
So nothing about GST will now or coming forward be mentioned in the union budget.
Yes.
So when will they mention it? When will they mention it? When will they make it easier?
They do have periodic GST Council meetings in which several decisions on GST cutbacks, where you also heard about the very famous popcorn differentiation tax,
Ah, the caramel.
the
Yeah,
caramel and the.
Akshat, that is the. I
I mean,
think
like
that.
Bollywood is 1 second, Sandeep. It's not like Bollywood is not tanking enough. Now you're going to like tax popcorn, and fewer people are going to go watch movies, and we'll be even more unemployable. Speaking of employability,
That's
right?
nothing to do with the rates.
Yeah.
But I think the problem with GST is the implementation, and that's where the so-called tax terrorism comes in. And one of the this is just a quote I'm playing, actually a soundbite I heard after the UP elections, in the UP the parliament elections. Some people in the trading community were saying, एक साथ तो रिश्वत देते उसके बाद भी हमारा रेड हो जाता है. Now, kahan jaye hum? And nobody can do that. It's so complex, the entire thing. That is where the real tax terrorism, etc., it comes in. As you said, that
Sandeep, as an individual person, I have a CA plus an accountant to keep my books in order. Can you imagine?
but
As a
if you
freelancer,
yeah,
as a
and if you
freelancer. I mean, it's ridiculous.
But if you talk to the CA and people, they're not particularly happy either, because life for them is not easy. Otherwise, you would have said one community which should have been very happy with this government are the CAs. Akshat might tell you, I as a prodigal CAs are very unhappy about the entire whole tax administration, the way it's going. Their life hasn't become easier for them. So those are the things they have to do, because all the rest of it are longer term building blocks. Whosoever wants it, you're not going to see the results even during this. You can go on talking about 2047, etc. That's a long haul. But even if you're looking at 2027, you're not going to get results of some of these things, be it skilling, be it your Makana board, or anything of that kind. So you have to de-bottleneck and make what they call ease of doing business a reality, a simpler thing. That is what I think will have to be done outside the budget.
So what is the vision, Sandeep? Was there a vision that you saw in the budget? Is there some sort
I
of
think there's an intention. See, this government has got slightly derailed. When it started with a lot of right noise, as well as, I think, a vision for reforms. But then they started getting waylaid right from day one with the land reforms. Then it came to the farm laws and everything else which came up to GST. They kind of managed to do it. After this, I think they've become shy of taking those hard steps. They could have taken certain hard steps. Maybe if BJP would have come back with a bang in June this year, but not having come back, that put it on a defensive for about 6 months. And right now, for them to do something dramatic is difficult, because the economy is already suffering. If the economy was doing very well, you could take some chances, be it like demonetization or GST or anything, could have made some big ticket changes. But now there is real stress in the system. So they cannot really also make big changes. Plus, they have to actually wait for Advaita, where it has not been spelled out. What's going to be the reaction of some of you were talking about the Trump regime, etc. That will require a lot of deft handling, maneuvering.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But as of now, we're very happy. 25% tariffs to Canada under Trudeau. We like Canada. We don't like Trudeau. Okay, Professor, you are disagreeing or agreeing with what Sandeep was saying?
Partly disagreeing. You see, I think there is an opportunity. GST revenues and the trajectory of GST revenues seems to have stabilized. So that earlier fear that we've somehow got this system, to tinker with it so fast, I could have understood that the government would be reticent to do something about it. Right now, I think the government at least knows that how this particular system works. So there are two things that the government can do: reduce the number of slabs and improve or make the administration easier. I think somewhere down the line, within a year or so, you may see some advance in that particular direction. That is why I said I was reading this budget in the context of the economic survey. And when the Economic Advisory Council says that there is a trust deficit that has to be brought down, I would imagine these are the things that he basically also wants to bring out. As I said, the budget, especially after the GST Council, many of the things, the dollops that the finance minister could give, is now in the purview of the GST Council. So, to some extent, it has now become a bookkeeping exercise. And therefore, any statements I see in the economic survey, and I try to find out whether the budget is in consonance with the economic survey or not. It is. So, I believe much of the changes that we will see now are regulatory, where the government will try to make things simpler.
I hope so.
Big ticket laws. No, I certainly look. Who has the GST made things easy for? For the bureaucrat, for the government. Aram se baithe raho. All the hard work is done by the businessmen in trying to figure out what their tax liabilities are. Bharo, aram se every month you are getting a particular statement, which was the dream of the bureaucrat. So all the work, in a sense, is being done by the businessmen in figuring out what the laws are, what the taxes are, and they are doing it. The bureaucrat
Forget the
is simply
businessman. I'm telling you about myself as a freelancer.
Yeah,
There's no
exactly.
reason why I should have a CA and an accountant. I mean, it's
Absolutely. And the smaller the businessman, the more difficult it is. And
Yeah.
we are looking at the MSME sector to generate employment, to generate output. This is basically the knife edge, the cutting edge sector, supposed to be the cutting edge sector. That's not happening. So
Okay.
these are the reforms we need to see if the economy is to move forward.
Akshay, do you agree? Do you agree with this, with Professor Saurabh?
On a very lighter note, the government in the budget, if I see as a very layman, says that, okay, we realize you're in pain. You have too much of pain, too much of problems everywhere, all around. And we recognize, and all what we are giving you is medicines. We are not here for medicines and alternative therapies. We need indigenous treatments and things to get corrected at the core. When you see that you will not be a borrowing-based economy and an investment-based economy, in that pretext, it is very important that significant steps are taken to reboost and recast that, which is where I find there is a gap. See, there is always going to be a disparity. We are not here to have a parity and equilibrium, but given the prevailing disparity, how we can only minimize this is the role of the government. The demography of every state in our country is very different. Every state is a mini country in itself. Now, you announce in a union budget that, look, we are going to have an index. We are going to give you ratings. Which state has performed how? But every state has its own demography, its potential. What mindset are we trying to nurture by doing that? Every state, we talk about facilitation, we talk about working with the state governments, appreciate. Nothing can happen because implementation is state subject. But by doing indexes and all, it's mere optics. What is important is to address the grassroots level problem. And today it's a very big concern for our country, which will only get addressed by making the youth and the citizens of this country employable and providing them employment. You may provide aids to trade, but today you have to provide aids to employment.
And make life easier for people who want to be self-employed, don't kind of make it difficult for them. I mean, I regard myself as someone who's self-employed, but it's just such a pain. There's all of this tax, GST stuff. Go ahead, Sandeep, you wanted to say something.
No, I think you're very right. Prime Minister talks of from job seekers to job givers, etc. So even self-employed people like you are giving out jobs. Just imagine if you could pay all of us, that our income would increase. We could.
I already pay my CA and accountant. I'm sorry, there's nothing left over for you all.
That's what I'm saying. More.
That was the point of this entire thing.
Jokes apart, it's the MSME sector which will create the employment multiplier which I'm talking about. Otherwise, government jobs and infrastructure spending will give you a certain kind of class of work, But unless, because your problem today is a lot of it is on the white collar sector, you've created, engineers, even PhDs, graduates, with no disrespect to PhDs like doctor, many of them are actually unemployable because the quality of this thing. So it is not surprising that they are applying for certain jobs. The problem in the country is not that there are not enough jobs, but they're not the right kind of jobs at the right pay or the right kind of profiling. So that's where the mismatch is. There are certain, I think, sensible, one is finding rather than from blanket motherhood ones. Like I saw in skills development, they're talking now specific to tourism sector. Now that's a good way to go about it. If they're creating tourism sector and destination-based PLI, they say that's a very good concept. I heard that they're going to destination tourism. They're going to make PLIs and get skill training for those areas. That's good. They're talking about actually today National Center of Excellence for Skilling, because you need to make relevant skilling. Otherwise, creating those ITIs and then making everybody else, again, it's neither here nor there. Unfortunately, a scheme like Agniveer was again bombed down, but those are ways to get immediately also skills developed and people to be employed and creating offering immediate employment, because anywhere, even in the organized sector, people come through that route. People come through as temps and then they become trainees, and from there they get their final jobs, or even if not in the same organization, once they train, they go elsewhere. And unless our problem is we create that, we are not going to. So a lot of it coming, closing it here, as Akshat said and everybody said, I would see, if government is serious, I would expect a series of executive orders, just like your Trump has done in terms of regulatory things to simplify it in the next, if you hear that happen, that kind of executive orders coming through, let it be debated in parliament later on. Let Rahul Gandhi go and say whatever he wants to wherever, but make those changes and get the thing going. You have to crack the whip.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we need that government back, which was taking decisions, which was surging forward with what appeared as drastic solutions, but we're getting things done. I think we're missing a little bit of that energy in this term. It is the third term, so it's understandable, but one wants to see a little more of that now. What do you think, Professor? Are we going to see a little more of that?
Look, with the farm bill, you saw the tamasha that happened.
I understand, yes.
Where you had people starting to question the unity and integrity of the country, the kind of terrorism that took place. You see, what a tamasha. And you had the intellectual class turning completely dishonest. People who had been arguing for these reforms when they were in the power, when they were in the Congress, these people started to write tomes and tomes about what the damage the farm bill would bring. So there is this particular problem of hypocrisy where a influential segment is willing to do things which can damage the unity and integrity of the country just to stop this particular government. And you could have steamrolled things with a lot of bloodshed. This government chose not to do so. When it comes to the land bill also, you had suddenly strange people making strange noises. So there is this particular problem, given the fact that you're a democracy, and some people from the very day one were trying to act in a particular way, which would have brought the law and order situation into question. I can understand doing what it is doing, but I think the government can still do a lot. For example, those are big ticket items, but reforming the government, to make it easier for businessmen, that did not. You don't have to basically talk about big laws. You have to reform the bureaucracy to induce more trust into the system. The time is right now. This does not require you to take on the opposition parties or take on vested interests. What you have to do is to take on segments of the government itself. Call off your hounds. If you are able to do that, I think much can be done. But there are certain things which are also disappointing where Indian business is concerned. We used to be very good where Jugaad is concerned. Remember, Indian Jugaad used to be the thing. The Chinese DeepSeek, that AI tool that the Chinese have bought out, that actually is a Chinese Jugaad. But that should have been done by Indian IT firms. But when your IT majors say, yeah, the big models will be done by the big guys, we will do the application end, it's such a short-sighted policy.
You're a chop
And that
shop,
is what,
basically. Basically, you're a chop shop. That's what you're doing.
you as Surya
You're an
Kanegaonkar, so
IT, basically, you're an
Advaita,
IT sweatshop, right?
yes,
Bangladesh makes
Surya,
clothes, you do
Surya
programming.
Kanegao,
That's what you're doing.
Surya Kanegaonkar says you're at one trick pony. You're basically doing labor arbitrage. Now, luckily and very happily, Vaishnav has basically talked about we are going to come out with our own reasoning based models in a few months. I believe we can do that. I believe we can do that. But see, that is the kind of innovation that India Incorporated is also not doing. There was a time they did that. During the time when we had process patents instead of product patents, Indian companies took the most advanced medicines and they synthesized it using alternative ways. You had people in the south making pressure cookers, the safety valve of pressure cookers, Indian invention. So you had corporate India doing that, but now to see those sectors which are cutting edge taking a deliberate decision not to go into innovation at all is also so sad. And I'm happy that the government, in a sense, is stepping in this direction also.
I mean, the only thing our space program is something that is really sort of set
Our
benchmark.
space program is also, Advaita, our space program is also Jugaad. What are we doing? We are doing what the West has already done, but we are doing it at a fraction of the cost. That is what the Chinese did with AI.
Our defense, plus building our indigenous, warships and the that's
aircraft. This is
aircraft.
what we should do. This
Yeah.
is what we should do. This is what we should do, and with renewed vigor, because this is capable of generating host of downstream industries.
Yeah,
There
absolutely.
are companies who are capable of it.
Like someone pointed out, because DOS is under PM office directly, is happening. So do you think, Sandeep, I want to ask you that. Do you think there is this tendency that nobody really wants to take risks, be it at a ministerial level or at a bureaucratic level, and it's pretty much status quo? And if it's like the PMO and his kind of vision, it gets done. But the others don't seem to kind of be complementing that.
I totally agree with you, Advaita. These are perceptions. Take away. If you really look at the profile of people, how many people really exude that kind of a mindset that the PM does? There are few people around him who are at least trying to execute, but do the wide berth of all the politicians who are there, are they all speaking the same kind of language? And I think that's the difference we have between our kind of a system and, let's say, today what you're seeing in the US. Right or wrong, whether you're a Trump supporter or not a Trump supporter, but everybody who is coming on board in that administration are today speaking the same language, the same not only the walk, but the talk, everything else which is coming. And that is the kind of alignment and synergy which you need to see. And what Professor was saying, first 2 terms, whatever I've done, but now, just like even the Trump administration is exposing what had happened in the previous period to, derail stuff, I think this government also, what you're talking, Professor, of this year's economic survey, is a bit like a white paper. That white paper should have come in 2014. But better late than never. Similarly, you need to have a white paper on everything else that was, derailed or waylaid at that point in time. And now the government should. Mr. Modi also, I think, he used to say, now he's also got a finite time frame to deliver on these things. And that has to be very quick. So I am still hoping to see some of the, hard actions happening. One good thing is many schemes have been announced in which the states have to play in tandem. If they do it, there is supplementing or complementing by the center. At least the BJP government should take that up. BJP government should get into that whole competitive spirit of governance and development. If those things happen, you'll see some of probably.
That's the other thing, Akshat. I want to ask you this. A lot of times, the the government does have a policy, does have a scheme, but because of political differences, if a state government is not of the BJP, they won't take it up. And then it's just this back and forth that goes on. Is there any way in which you can actually penalize a state government for not signing up for schemes which are helpful or will generate employment? Because for how long is this going to, this interest in politicking going to impact the public, the people? Because we're just left watching these guys fight it out.
So very sensitive, Advaita. We have been in a multi-political party country, and these issues are going to remain. Now, penalization is not the solution. What is rather the solution is inclusion in the process of implementation and in the process of getting it implemented at the stage of preparation. That is where we lack. We have to understand that every government, hence, and we have all clearly understood after the last general election, that coalition is going to dominate any kind of governmental setup, political setup. And in this coalition form of governmental setup which we are going to have in the country, what is important is to have inclusion in creating policies and creating regulations. Today, the finance minister has announced, yesterday she has announced in the budget about a high power committee for regulatory reforms. So there itself, it is important that just as we have the GST Council, some kind of platform is created where inclusive views and inclusive participation of all state governments are taken, considered, and then a unified mechanism is floated. You see in GST, if the GST Council has decided something, it is implemented by all the states. So where there are concerns of implementation, except for law and order, which is obviously a state subject and very different in speaking, it is important that the views, the considerations have to be taken into account. The central government is the custodian of every state. It cannot give report cards merely without having non-inclusions and rejecting and dejecting someone who are not part of the government or where they are having a different political affiliation. Yes, double agent Sarkar has worked well, but at the same time, these limitations are going to exist. So what is important is not capital punishment, but inclusion from inception.
Professor, what do you think?
I agree to great extent what Akshat said. But you remember these disobedience, that central government has imposed a scheme, I'm not going to follow it. Apart from the odd mamata, generally state governments do actually cooperate with the center. Sometimes they are afraid to say it open. For example, the chief minister of Telangana or the chief minister of Karnataka would be unable to say this openly because, when it comes to the optics, La Familia would be very, very angry. But by and large, you see cooperation among the states. And the GST Council is the very good example of, cooperation at the federal level. People may make noises here and there, but in general, GST Council meetings go very well because there is a unified sense of purpose. So I don't think what you said is a problem. The states, states not doing. There are some states which are proactive. There are some states, in a sense, who have gone woke. And those states who have become populist are facing a massive fund crunch, be it Karnataka, be it Himachal Pradesh. Those states which are disciplined will do well. They may not actually praise Modi, but if they basically do their homework, make their state more attractive where investment is concerned, they will get investment. And if you don't, you will not get investment.
No, that's okay. That's okay. That's inviting investment. But when you go populist and you go, on the verge of bankruptcy and you can't pay your government officers and things like that, which we've seen with Himachal Pradesh and things of those sort happening, then what is the solution? Is the rest center supposed to carry these governments along, or the rest of the states are supposed to come out and bail them out of these situations?
If you can't pay you come to a situation where you can't pay your officers, in 2-3 years, when the election comes, you'll be thrown out anyway. Because you will not be able to even give basic services. So there are certain things you can do, there are certain things you can't do. If a state government insists on profligacy, it will run into trouble. but there's a limited amount of stuff that you can actually do to help, to actually stem that particular thing while a state government is at it, because we are a federal polity, whether you like it or not.
Okay, really interesting. Any final comments? If you all were to give marks to the budget, what would you give it out of 10, Sandeep Ghosh? And only the marks, don't give a justification, explanation.
I'd give between 6 and 7.
Okay. Akshat?
6.5.
That's the same thing. Between 6 and 7 and 6.5 is the same thing.
He'd be most precise. He'd be more precise.
More precise, resonate with what Sandeep says.
Okay. And Professor?
I'll give it 9.
Oh, that's a high score.
It's a high score. Since you didn't ask for justification, I can't justify it, but there are reasons why I'll give it 9. But Advaita, we are not talking about certain things. The changed world environment that basically this budget is being presented. Remember, post-COVID, you had a budget and we had great expectations and the world went to war over Ukraine. Okay? Now, with Trump coming in, there are two kinds of operating things working. I think now we will see peace where Ukraine is concerned. Necessary adjustments with respect to Russia will be made. I think you will see peace in Ukraine. The terms of those peace will probably not be favorable to Ukraine, maybe favorable to Russia. But one thing that will stabilize the global markets is peace in Ukraine. And with that, I think there will be a pickup in the global markets. The second thing is Trump's policy vis-a-vis the other countries. For a long time now, the United States, Trump believes, has been a sink for the world's imports. It's the easiest market to crack. We export to United States, we don't import in return. The worst offender, by the way, is China. Okay. Now the thing is, Trump will go to every country and will demand that we import more from the United States. Now, how we tackle this particular issue, I think, remains to be seen. I, for one, am all for an FTA with the United States, where their goods are easy to import, our goods are easy to export. Because I think when it comes to apparel and when it comes to electronics, if we get the kind of access that other countries have had exporting to the United States, it could do wonders for our exports and it could do wonders for our employment, because apparel is an labor-intensive area. So I think there is that particular chance where we can do well, because our relations with Trump have been pretty good. So there are certain things we can manage with Trump. He's a transactional guy. I think these transactions can be done with respect to Trump, and we can find ourselves in a better place. But there is that particular
But you can never take things for granted, no, Professor? Because remember with the ivermectin, he was ready to go at it with us at that time. Yes, Professor.
You are giving Professor them marks for what is the future paper. We are talking of the current examination. You are saying
the current
that is all out of syllabus right now.
All this is out of syllabus. For my 9 out of 10, I'm talking about a development that we have not spoken about when it comes to the performance of the Indian economy. Okay, this is nothing to do with the budget.
So good. We hope Professor gets also called into the think tank in the government. It's high time you join. No, I'm not.
Yeah, and if you get called, Professor, please ensure that this GST thing is made easier. Okay, that's my only request from the government. Otherwise, I'm a libertarian.
We genuinely believe you ought to get into those things, rather than all the woke people who were taken earlier and who have now turned totally hostile to the government after leaving them. It's people like you who ought to be there. We lost Vivekda, so it's the same.
Oh, what are you going on about, Sandeep? Yes, Akshat, our esteemed guest for the evening.
I hope, Professor, we will have no more Makhana, Litti Choka boards and Center of Excellence for Employment. Yeah.
I think the Makhana board is a good idea. In fact, I'm all for standardizing even Indian food across the world. Do you know the amount of Indian restaurants that do well and how many of them are owned by actual Indians?
Pakistani, sab sale Pakistanis hai.
Makhana is
We
in
need,
Southeast
we
Asia.
need boards to standardize these things, yeah.
In East
In-
Asia, they eat makhana raw. We have it roasted, but makhana, I'm told in countries like Vietnam and even China or Thailand, they have the makhana in a raw form, and that is also equally popular. So makhana is good. We have Litti Choka festivals in West Bengal nowadays. We could do that as well, all for national integration.
Listen, guys. You all actually, that you're not creative, you're like all like in the mechanics of things. Look at what like Bolivia and Peru did with quinoa. It's the world over. It's a superfood. I don't see how we can't do that with makhana. I mean, look at the geotagging that France does with all its products. I mean, Trump actually told Macron once that I'm going to charge, extra tariffs on French wine, and he backstepped on his thing. So economies are running on these things. Okay, so don't knock them. I'm all for the makhana board. In fact, there should be more.
Advaita, while there is a very good reason to promote the local cuisines of India, we didn't need to have a makhana board, right? But that being done, it's a very minor thing in the major scheme of things.
Considering you
We
all have
need-
mentioned it at least a dozen times,
Yeah, because
you know.
a makhana board sounds thoda, ajeeb hai yaar. कोई बात
What do
नहीं.
you want to call it? Foxtail board? Is that better?
No, I wouldn't have called it
FTB?
anything at all.
So
I
it
would have
sounds
kept
like a
quiet about
crypto
it.
coin.
You know,
FTB.
I would have kept quiet about it.
Anyway, we've come a long way, as I tweeted yesterday, from the time when people used to look at what new trains would be introduced for Bihar. At least now you're talking of new airports. That shows that there has been directionally some movement, and if Makhana board is there, so be it.
No, also, and I'm glad you brought out airports, because I just think it's insane that we essentially have only 3 airlines now. And if you look at the prices of tickets to Prayagraj, for example, which is an hour and 25 minutes, insane.
No, but
A round trip
that-
costs you
Advaita,
more than you going to Thailand. I mean, there has to be
Advaita,
some regulation.
Advaita, this is
What?
the busy season for thing. So there will be these particular surges. So do what I did, travel to Banaras and take a vehicle to Prayagraj. Problem khatam.
It's
But
not a question of problem, Khatam, it's exploitative, that's all. And the fact that
Yeah,
we only have 3 or 4 airlines to choose from is another problem.
is a
Yeah.
problem.
That is
But
what we were expecting to be resolved from the budget. That
But
we
again,
spent-
coming back, sorry to close the thing on Makhana, it's not such a bad idea. I know for a fact today afternoon I was discussing, there are some tea gardens in the Northeast who are trying to do experimental Makhana farming. There are people trying to do so. I think it has triggered the imagination. People are looking at it, and Advaita is doing everything for it. She should be a brand ambassador for the Makhana board. If nothing else, we can get some sponsorship from them, Advaita. Can you imagine Abhijit, you and Pallavi doing a Makhana dance?
Makhana dance. I know, Pallavi, we could do a Makhana dance. That's brilliant. There's your marketing cap on. We could be like, back in the day, there was the Macarena. We could do the Makhana.
God forbid.
Yeah, we could do a version of that, and maybe we'll get sponsorship from the Makhana board. Not bad.
So you put on your writer's hat and write a song on Makhana, which Abhijit can sing on the next show.
And now, I mean, remember Macarena also had this was before viral, right? It had those Macarena,
Yeah.
Now we're in the viral zone, so we can do a viral dance also with it.
Yes,
Macarena. Chalo. Thank you.
Akshat, I hope you had fun. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
hope you come back.
Bhojpuri version of Macarena. That's what we'll have.
That we'll get Abhijit to write, the
Yeah.
Bhojpuri version.
Okay. Bye.
Macarena.
Good night. Happy
Bye.
Vasant Panchami
Bye,
to all of
everyone.
you.
Bye.
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 And find Advait Pallavi's earphones. Yeah.